So one of the most important things that the Attorney General did was actually to intervene in ways that attorney generals never intervene or have never done before. This is really quite unprecedented, to come into Lake County, San Diego County, and other places and suggest that county commissioners or city council folk need to take a real pause before they greenlight developments in areas that burn. Eastern San Diego County has burned once every 18 months or so, and that's exactly where city and county have been placing housing. And so what Becerra is saying is, look, we've got a climate change driven issue. We have to be worried about that. It's one of the mission statements of the state of California is to control climate change's impact. And one of the things they've got to control is this out of control housing development process. If we think about climate change's impact, we need to think about it in a couple of levels. First, since the 1980s, cities and communities and areas west of El Paso have been drying out. So we've got a 40-year track record already. The expectation from climate scientists is that this is going to continue for the rest of the century, which means effectively a full century of decreased precipitation in one of the most populous areas in the United States. And so think Tucson and Phoenix, as well as San Diego, Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, Denver, and other places. And suddenly you begin to recognize that just in the loss of precipitation, we can predict that trees and chaparral are going to become desiccated over this period of time, and already have. So when we think about the great fires that have hit eastern San Diego, the Witch, the Cedar, and the Harris Fire over the last 15 years, add to that increased drying, more aridity to whatever the vegetation is in those particular regions, and we've got a problem. And we're seeing that in California everywhere. Last fall, last August and September, 5 of the largest 6 fires in recorded history were burning simultaneously. That's what's driving Becerra to slow this process down. That's what's driving Governor Newsom to start to engage with this issue in a way that's crucial. So when a community, whether it's the city of San Diego, the county of San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Napa, Lake counties, decides that they're going to build very large housing subdivisions in areas that we know historically have burned, at a time when we know those fires are going to become more intense, more wind driven, which means much more dangerous, then it's time for councils of one form or another really to stop themselves from greenlighting that which their predecessors used to do without even thinking. We can't do that any longer, because one policy, we need new housing, should not then put the people who live in that housing in danger. All politicians take an oath to uphold the health, welfare, and safety of the citizenry. To build in places that are going to burn is to violate that oath. Here's a story I heard from Oakland firefighters who had battled the 1991 blaze there that was so devastating. And then all of the houses were rebuilt because insurance companies enabled that to happen. We were walking up this very narrow one-way in and out road. And they said, first look at the road, it hasn't changed. And then they said, turn left and right and look at the cars in the driveway, which are, sort of steroidal SUVs. And then they showed us one of their trucks, which can no longer get up those roads because they've also gotten bigger. So infrastructure matters enormously. And if we don't build in relationship to it, any gesture that a council or a county commissioner might say, which is, don't worry, we've got your back covered, that's not true. And so the planning has to take into account the very nature of the houses and the number of people in those areas. And even if a subdivision has 2 or 3 exits, for example, how do we know which ones are going to be burning, right? So the prior move, the precautionary principle is think very carefully before we build, because of the nature of our automobiles, the nature of fire trucks, the size of houses, and the density of population in areas that historically have burned. As those escalate, so do the number of people we will be required to evacuate. And that's the danger that we have to be thinking about first before we say to a developer, yeah, let's build that 1,200, 1,500 person subdivision. The default issue for city councils, county commissioners, and the like has always been that growth drives the economy. And the thing that drives growth are housing starts. That's been true since World War II. It's one of the metrics by which economists determine whether a nation or a county or a state's economy is booming. How many houses are you building? It's a really funny metric when you think about it, because it doesn't actually tell us much. And so part of what I would encourage city councils and county commissioners to be thinking about is, if housing is the default, if growth is the only metric by which we are growing our economy, then maybe we're doing this wrong. To have more people living in places that are dangerous surely can't be the metric by which we determine the economic health of a community, when at the exact same moment we endanger the public's health. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I think if I was thinking about how to encourage councils and commissioners to think through their strategies, I would talk about climate change, to be sure, but I would do it in a way that links that climate change to the physical structures that we inhabit, the number of people that are located there. And if you want to start counting fire hydrants, I would do that also. And then to ask a simple question: can you really protect people who are living on the margins of communities in areas that we know historically burn? Or are you gambling that not enough people will die or have to be evacuated, that it will blow back at your own political position? It's not cynical to suggest that councils and commissions are unaware of the political consequences of saying no to developers. But at some point, they're going to have to strap it on and get themselves into a position where it does not require the attorney general to come in and force them to do the job that they should have done anyway. For a city council person or a county commissioner who makes a decision in 2021, say, to build a housing development that might actually not be completed by the time their term is up, or they have decided to step away, they pay nothing for that decision. It's going to be someone else who will be held accountable. But that's not very sustainable as a process. Sustainability requires us to think outside of ourselves. What is this going to look like in 10 to 15 years? And I think the collision between the dense population of Southern California building out to its margins collides with climate change and the shifting regime of water to create a perfect storm. And it's a firestorm that is actually looming. And I would hope that the politicians of the region will hold themselves accountable and not wait for a state agency or a state official to tell them what their job is. They should know. Well, I think part of what the technology has helped us understand, and actually in scary sort of ways, is the speed with which fires are now moving, the erratic nature of it because of oftentimes they're wind driven by 40, 50, 60 mile an hour winds. That pushes fires in various ways. And once that wind gets into canyons and starts wrapping off of the sides and then shooting up in various directions, it's really, really hard to fight. And so one of the things those Oakland firefighters told me was, in a wildfire that's burning with a 10 mile an hour push from wind, we're firefighters. Anything over that, we're observers. that they actually can only nip at the margins. They can't and should not get in front of a fire. That's like the last place you want to be. But also, as they suggested, a shift in winds means a shift in fire, and you could be trapped. And we've seen enough of that in California, actually throughout the West, of fire crews that have been trapped in canyons and elsewhere and can't get away from it and ultimately pay the final price for that.
Yeah.
That too should be on the minds of city council folks, the residents who live in particular areas. What about the people that run up towards the fire when the rest of us are running away? Their safety matters also. And so there is a moral obligation here to be thinking about everyone who's involved, including those in the front lines who are trying to save people.